Hello everyone. We've been studying the Visuddhimagga for the past months now. And one of the major topics that we've looked at is in the topic of sila, or ethics or morality, is the use of requisites. And there were some questions surrounding the use of requisites, and some around maybe why it's such a big deal, or what does it mean to reflect on the use of requisites. And I don't know that I've ever done a video on the requisites themselves particularly, so not in depth anyway. So I thought it might be worth to address this in a dedicated video. Why it could be worth talking about the use of requisites, and by requisites we mean physical requisites, things that you use, possessions that you make use of. It's not directly a part of meditation practice, right? The use of external things isn't a part of mindfulness meditation, which doesn't even involve itself with things. It involves itself with experiences. So if you have a thing like a robe, you don't take it as a robe, you take it as an experience of seeing or feeling if you're wearing it, and the mental aspects of liking it or disliking it, or any kind of mental proliferation about it. So you take those momentary experiences as your object. You don't even involve yourself with the things. That being said, especially in the area of what we call sila, there's a lot of conceptual support that can be done in order to help you to get to the point where you're able to experience things as momentary experiences, and to do that consistently. So not just to have an intellectual appreciation of the momentary nature of experience, but to consistently keep yourself in a state of mind where you're able to repeatedly bring your mind back to focus just on experiences. So in the realm of conception of people and places and things, there are of course many things that distract us, take us away from the ability to be mindful. And so we try to use conceptual reality of people and places and things in a way that focuses our attention and brings our mind back to ultimate reality of momentary experiences. And the use of requisites is one quite important means of doing that, because it relates to the things in our life. For people, for example, how would we make use of our relationships with people to cultivate focus? Well, one of course is the Brahma Viharas of friendliness and compassion. When you think about people, instead of getting angry or frustrated by them, you wish them well, and you wish them to be free from suffering. For things, one of the very important topics is the use of the requisites, because there are things that we conceive of as our possessions, like this robe is my robe. And so I'm constantly going to be interacting with the robe, right? In the morning I have to put the robe on. I have to wash the robe. I have to keep the robe clean, and I have to protect the robe and wear it properly so it doesn't drag on the ground and so on. And I have to guard my mind against the potential for clinging to the robe. I like this robe, or worrying about it, or if it gets torn or something, to be upset about that as it gets worn away, and so on. If it gets something spilt on it and stained on it. Like any possession, there's always the potential for worry and concern and misuse. Use in such a way that it takes us away from mindfulness, takes us away from the present moment. So that's what's meant by the use of requisites, or why it's valuable anyway. As far as what we mean by requisites. In a strict sense, there are only 4 requisites, and these are the 4 requisites of a monk. So a monk has robes as a requisite, a monk has food as a requisite, and a monk has a dwelling place as a requisite, and the monk has medicine as a requisite. And we're to try to strive for the most austere form of these things, the most simple and undesirable forms of these things. So like for a dwelling place, we're to strive as much as possible to not live in a room like this, but to live under a tree, which of course is not often, not always a feasible endeavor, but we're still supposed to strive and to consider this and to not be concerned. There have been times where, or there will be times, maybe times where you can't get a place to live and you might fret and worry as a monk, and then remember the Buddha's teaching and just go and sit under a tree and be mindful, sleep under a tree, at least for nights when you're not able to get a more modern accommodation. Things like that. So monks are to strive for this sort of simplicity, and in a strict sense, those are the requisites. So first of all, a monk is to try to strive for not having many belongings or many possessions, and to keep them simple and austere, as simple and austere as possible. But for non-monastics, this teaching, of course, is equally applicable. You've just got to extrapolate. So you can extrapolate the meaning behind the 4 requisites, first of all. And you can say, well, everyone has need for clothing, and everyone has need for food, of course, and lodging, and medicine. And these are some very basic necessities that we can all contemplate on. I mean, clothing, of course, it's a fairly superficial attachment, but it is one nonetheless, where we attach to nice clothes, fine clothes, expensive clothes, brand name clothes, that sort of thing. That's a good opportunity for us to reflect, and it's a good object because of how often we interact with it, to use as a support for being mindful, reminding, these clothes, this is why I use them, this is the nature of them, and so on. And that helps us bring us back to focus and eventually ultimate reality and experience. So you can extrapolate to clothes, but you can extrapolate food as well. Of course, for monks it's alms food, but for lay people, of course, there's a lot more involved with food, and in some ways it's an even better object for lay people to contemplate because of how much preparation and work goes into seeking out food, preparing food, and planning meals and so on. So there's so much more potential for greed, craving, worry, stress, and that sort of thing. And so a great opportunity for us to apply the Buddha's teaching, and to reflect and to use the requisites properly. For lodging, of course, everyone has lodging, and it's easy to seek out expensive lodging and to try and get a big house and comfortable bedding and comfortable plush furniture and so on. And medicine. So with medicine, obviously there's the abuse of hypochondria, of taking supplements and concerning yourself over much with physical health. But regardless of abuse or not abuse, medicine is something that we take. We take food as medicine, but we also take supplements when we're sick. And use of medicine is subject to abuse in terms of painkillers, in terms of again, supplements and those sorts of things. But regardless, it is something that we have to use. And it is something we should use. We shouldn't try to patiently endure as our body becomes sicker and weaker and our organs get destroyed and so on. There are times where medicine is quite valuable and important in supporting our practice. So again, something that we use on a regular basis, something that we can use to help remind us why we're taking it, especially when we're sick, because in order to allow us to approach the sickness in the right way. This sickness involves great pain and suffering, and it involves the deterioration of the body and so on. And when we reflect on, we're using the medicine to help mitigate that. Again, that helps us focus on the reality of the experience, potentially, if we use it properly. So that's a way of extrapolating. But obviously, another way of extrapolating the teachings, even for monks, is that we can apply it to everything we use. We can apply the same principles of reflection to everything we use. For lay people, there are, of course, so many things. You have cars, you have, televisions, microwaves, dishwashers, refrigerators, many, many appliances, tables and chairs and couches and many, many things. You have things for entertainment, things for utility tools and many kinds of vehicles, bicycles and so on and so on. And all of these many things can be considered requisites. You can say, well, for my job I need a car. And so you consider the use of the car in a way according to the Dhamma of the Buddha. You don't go and buy a car like a sports car because it's flashy and because it makes you feel great. You buy a car that is dependable and is reasonable and is suitable for the purpose. Keep you grounded and keep you focused on being mindful rather than indulging in sensuality. Because a lot of the problem with these things is they become an indulgence in sensuality. Even monks' robes can be an indulgence if you like the fine feel of them. You know, there are even silk robes that you can get, and it's allowed to wear silk, but it certainly is a potential for great defilement and attachment if you do use silk robes. So it's not that you can't use them. And for all these things, it really is that way, that even many of the things in modern times that we use, maybe the Buddha wouldn't have approved of their use, but it isn't so much about use of this or use of that, it's about how you use it, much more. The reflection on the requisites is about that. As to what requisites are suitable, for example, for a monk or even for a layperson, that's another issue. And it is an issue. Like guns, for example, even for lay people, the Buddha would say those aren't appropriate. But that's not what we mean by the reflection on requisites. Once we establish that this is something that I need to use, you have to justify its use, and you have to be honest with yourself that that is indeed why you're using it, not for some defiled or corrupt purpose. That's going to lead to attachment, addiction, or other kinds of evil. So this is about the nature of the requisites. As far as what it means to reflect on the requisites, and this is really what the important part of this teaching, there are three ways to reflect on the requisites. And so the most common one that's well known in Buddhist circles, especially at least here in Thailand, is reflection as to purpose. Why are we using it? So this is kind of what I've been talking about. And this is the most superficial way of using the requisite, reflecting on the requisite. It's not that that's a bad thing. This is a teaching of the Buddha. It's a good thing. But it's the lowest because it's conceptual. You're still thinking of them as things that I use. So of course it's never going to cut through delusion or ego or conceit or the view of self. It's still I'm using them. But you say to yourself, you're honest, you say, why am I using them? And you try to tell yourself that I'm going to use these for a purpose that is wholesome, that is conducive towards further practice of seeing clearly. That's why sila is a very preliminary teaching, and in many ways it is involved with concepts of people and places and things. And in the case of things, we reflect on why we're using them. So for example, robes, we don't use them for beautification. We don't use them for sensual pleasure of the comfort of wearing them. We use them to guard against heat and cold and bugs. Robes are very good against mosquitoes. And we use them to cover the body, because of course the body exposed is a source of a lot of problems. So we cover the body up with the robe. We use food to get rid of hunger and to keep alive, because if we stopped using food, if we stopped using robes, if we went naked, we could stay alive. But if we stop using food, obviously we don't stay alive. So we say, this is why I'm using it. And when you think of it like that, you think, oh, this is just to stay alive, then probably I don't need to eat so much. Now, for people living in the world, you have to generally eat more because of the physical labor that you engage in. But you might want to consider not to eat so much and then try to burn it off with exercise, right? We eat and eat and eat, and then we exercise to burn it off. It's kind of, that's not really a Buddhist thing to do. You should just eat less, and then you don't have to exercise so much to burn off all that weight. And of course, change the way you eat, to eat, reminding yourself, I'm eating to live, so I don't really need this cheesecake or these candies or sweets or desserts or chocolate. I don't really need these things. Unless you have reason to eat them. You don't eat, so you'll move away from eating things like junk food. When you remind yourself like this, you'll eat more healthy. As far as lodging, we use lodging for seclusion, because that's valuable. We don't want to get caught up in society and conversation and entertainment, chatting and that sort of thing. So we seclude ourselves. We have our individual rooms. This is why a closed room is so valuable in a place like this. Off in the forest, a tree is fine, but here a tree wouldn't work because you'd be surrounded by people and you'd be distracted by others talking and engaging with other people. So having a room is valuable, but it can be a problem because if you have seclusion, you can use it for nefarious purposes as well. You can use it to hide the bad things you do. So we're using it for seclusion and, of course, obviously for warding off the elements. It's great for mosquitoes. A big problem of living under a tree is the bugs, the mosquitoes. Absolutely. So we use it for that purpose. This is why we have rooms. And for medicine, again, we just use it to free ourselves from the pain of sickness and the deterioration of the body. But we don't use it to worry about the body, to fret about the body. We don't use it to try to be healthy forever, because health forever is an illusion, and not only an illusion, but it's misguided. Because even if it could work, at least for some time, it still leads to attachment and clinging to the body and clinging to this health, and it leads to the deterioration of the mind, which is what all these things are about, the reflection on the requisites. So, and of course you can extend this, why do I use a car, why do I use a computer, why do I use a telephone, all of these things that have great potential for misuse. Of course, you can use a car, misuse a car, you can misuse a computer, you can misuse a phone. All of these things are very easily misused, and so it makes reflection on them all the more valuable. The second form of reflection of the requisites is a little bit deeper, and it relates, you could say it is a form of samatha meditation, or it relates to samatha, tranquility meditation. So not yet on the level of ultimate reality, but still valuable in terms of tranquilizing the mind. And this is the reflection of the requisites as defiled, physically defiled, or kind of disgusting. And how are they disgusting? They're disgusting related to use. So this is valuable as a practice in order to free us from the enamorment, the clinging to the things as beautiful. So like when we cling to our robes as something very wonderful, it's valuable for us to remember, this is according to the Buddha, that as soon as I put these robes on, before I put the robes on, they're actually quite clean, and they actually are quite fine and clean. But as soon as I put them on the body, from the moment they touch my body, they start to become unclean. There's sweat on the body, there is smells that come out of the body, bacteria and so on. There are oils, there are skin flakes. Of course, if anything, when I walk out, when it gets dust on it, if anything drops on the robes, the Buddha had us reflect. There's a reflection that we can do that says, these things aren't unclean, but as soon as they touch the body, they become unclean. They become exceedingly unclean. This body is unclean, and they become unclean when they touch it. So this is a practice that you can do, and you reflect on your clothes this way. It helps very quickly remind you of the unattractive nature of these things. That you may be attracted to these things, but it's impermanent. It is a bit related to vipassana in that way, because you'll as you reflect, you'll see the impermanence. You'll see, oh yeah, this thing that was so beautiful is now corrupt. It's not really on the level of vipassana, but it is leading in that direction. There's a story of Chula Pantaka who was a king in a past life, and he had a cloth, and he was riding on his elephant, and he's a king riding on an elephant apparently in a past life, and it was so hot out that his sweat was pouring down, and it was dusty, and so he was getting quite grimy, and he had this, it was a white cloth, a very pure, clean, royal cloth, and he wiped his face like that with the towel, and then he looked down on it, and this beautiful, pristine cloth that, of course, when he picked it up, was something very attractive to him, had suddenly become grimy and disgusting. And it just resonated with him, I guess also because he had a lot of good qualities, but it resonated so strongly, just this simple change in beauty, how beauty is not permanent, and how the things that, something that could be so wonderful one moment, he just recognized in himself, watched how his perception of it changed, and it was suddenly disgusting. And that story is important because when he, in a future life, became a monk, it came back to him, and the Buddha gave him another cloth and said, here, go try this. And he just stood in the sun and he was rubbing the cloth, and he watched as his sweat dripped on it and the grime from his hands got on it, and he just watched it change from this beautiful, this white, clean cloth to something more grimy, and it just resonated with him again, and it was enough to inspire him to become enlightened. So, reflecting on the disgusting nature of the requisites, for food it works, it's really valuable. This food that we think is, oh, look at how delicious this food is. Well, once you put it in, once you touch it with your hand, it's already kind of disgusting. But once you put it in your mouth, nobody's going to want to touch it afterwards. You yourself, if you spit it out, you wouldn't want to touch it again either. But then, of course, once it goes down into your stomach, there's a whole meditation on the disgusting nature of food that is incredibly detailed. It starts from the moment of having to go to get food, because in my room is very clean, but when I leave my room, I've got to see all the disgusting stuff on the side of the road. Maybe I'll see a dead rodent or dead bugs. So already, even before I got the food, I've already defiled, it's already disgusting. There's the whole meditation, kind of like, it's kind of like a drama or something. It's a pretend, or not exactly pretend, but it's all conceptual, right? But it's for the purpose of helping you to see and freeing you from the attachment to the great and delicious nature of food. Because food is, of course, incredibly dangerous. It's dangerous, we know, for physical health, but of course equally dangerous, or even more perhaps, for mental health. If we're attached and clinging to food, it is the mental side of things that leads to overeating and misuse of food and so on. So the mind is much more important to concern ourselves with than the body in regards to food. Consider your mental relationship towards your food, how you relate to it mentally, how you think of food. So to artificially make this a reflection on, yes, these things are disgusting, is quite a valuable practice. It's valuable. It's called like the application of opposites, or the replacement with opposites. So on the one hand, you really like something, you crave for it, and you tell yourself, it's actually the opposite. And when you look at it instead as something disgusting, it helps to counteract that. So this isn't vipassana practice, but this is one of the ways that samatha works. Like when you're angry at someone, you wish them well, and that counteracts the anger. And it's quite valuable for bringing the mind back to a more neutral state. So you shouldn't get obsessed with things being disgusting. That's not a long-term goal, to think of food as disgusting and revolting. But when you see it like that, it's quite sobering. And the same with lodging. Well, bedding anyway. Bedding is disgusting when you lie down on it. That reflection helps you let go of your clinging and craving and attachment to, oh, my bed looks so nice, but actually your bed is kind of disgusting, especially when you lie down and it gets all disgusting and smelly and so on. It's just a sobering exercise. And of course with medicine, same with food. Same as with food. The third reflection is a little more interesting and relates much more to vipassana practice, and in fact involves or is affected through the practice of vipassana directly. So every moment where we practice mindfulness, we're able to reflect on the requisites in terms of their ultimate reality. So in fact, in all of the study that we did of the reflection on the requisites, most of it is conceptual, but there is an element where you can remind yourself that even these requisites are ultimate reality. As I said, the robe is seeing, feeling the robe is feeling, and so on. They are those experiences. And this is actually a reflection you can do. So it isn't the practice of vipassana, but it is something which immediately leads you or directs you towards the practice of vipassana. And you say to yourself, this robe that I'm wearing, or these robes that I'm wearing, are the four elements. They are earth, they are air, they are water, they are fire, which means they are experiences. All they are is tension, the feeling of the tension. They are the heat or the cold of the feeling of the robe. They are the hardness or the softness in the case of the robe. They are the experiences that we have when we put them on. They are those experiences. Also, this person, this being who wears them, there's no self, nijivo, nijivo, nisato. No, there's no being, no soul. Even the being who wears them is just the four elements. So this body also is the four elements, and also the consciousness element. So the consciousness is aware of it all. But all these things are elements. They are momentary aspects of experience, and that's all they are. So you reflect on everything you use in this way. This beautiful car that I have is actually just experiences, and this is a reflection you can do. It's not vipassana. When you say it to yourself, that's not vipassana, but it reminds you, yes, right, I should say to myself, seeing. It resonates with you, or it directs your mind towards the practice of vipassana. Food that I eat is only the feeling and the taste and the sight, and the body that eats it is only the hardness of the teeth and the tension of the tongue. These are sensations. These are the four elements. And then the mind that's aware of it is still just a momentary thing. Mind aware of something is a momentary awareness that arises and ceases. Same with our bedding, same with everything we use. When you use things, reminding yourself. It's on the deepest level, and it's not going to work all the time. Of course, if you're using your computer, for example, at work, you have to have conceptual thought about the work that you're doing. But to reflect from time to time that this beautiful laptop I have, or tablet, or this phone that I have, to remind yourself this is all it is just the feeling of it, and the sight of it, and the liking of it, how beautiful my phone is, or my computer is. You know, I got the latest phone that's really quite attractive and quite a cause for craving and clinging. It can be quite a cause for defilement. All of the things that we use can be this way. This is a very important auxiliary practice, the reflection of the requisites. So important that the Buddha had us do it as monks every day. It's one of what we call the duties of a monk. That every day we should reflect on the requisites. And Mahasi Sayadaw sort of discusses these different ways. He says, some people get overly pedantic about this and say you have to do this chant every day. So we do a chant every day. But to be honest, most people who do the chant don't really think about the requisites when they do the chanting. I mean, many monks who chanted don't even know what they're saying, or new monks anyway. But he says, and he's right, that this is just an example. The chant is just the example. The actual practice of reflection of the requisites is the reflection that you do. And so it can be, why am I using this? For everything you do, suppose this towel, do I really need this? I've got another towel up there. I don't really need a second towel, so maybe I can do without this. But if I do use it, what am I using it for? Well, I'm using it because it's hot in here and I sweat a little bit, and so it lets me wipe that off. Furthermore, I say, oh, look, once I wipe my face with this towel, it's already disgusting. And so that, why I might say that, is because maybe I like this towel. Maybe I think, oh, it's so soft and wonderful. But now I don't think like that. Now I think, oh, it's disgusting. It's putrid. And I've got to use it. Wish I didn't have to use this putrid thing, but I've got to use it. And I'm just going to make it putrid again every time I wipe my face with it. My putrid face. And the third, of course, most important and most valuable, is that when I use it, the feeling of the cloth in my hand, I feel it. When it touches my face, there's a feeling on the face. And the mental aspects of liking the feeling. Maybe I like when I wipe and the sweat is gone, and that sort of thing. So it's just some detail, because people are asking questions, and just because it's a generally useful topic. This is going to be a huge part of any Buddhist's life, how they use the things that they own mindfully and in a way that accords with the Buddha's teaching. So the first is the reflection of why we're using it, a very conceptual reflection, but valuable nonetheless, because it points us in the right direction. We're using it just for this purpose, not for anything that's going to get in the way of our practice. Not to let these things be an obstacle, because if I really like this towel, or these robes, say, it can become, I might sit there and think about how wonderful the robes are. The reflection on the disgusting nature of things to counteract the craving and the liking of it. And of course the most important one, to counteract the delusion, to really pierce the veil of ignorance and to see things clearly as they are. And that is the reminder that this is just elements. This is only feeling. The reality there is feeling, seeing, thinking, liking, disliking. All of these things are momentary. They are not self. They are not soul. They arise and they cease. Thinking like that allows me to use the requisites as objects of mindfulness. Food, use it as an object of mindfulness. Chewing, swallowing, tasting, and so on. So, hope that's valuable. It's just a rather in-depth look, I think, at the requisites and the use of requisites and the reflection on the use of requisites. So I hope that was valuable, and I wish you all peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering.